Is there a better battle than Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore? There is now. Week 1, D-Hop, Lat. Who's going to win that battle out? I think the quarterback has something to do with that on Tennessee's side that will help Marshawn Lattimore out, but it's one of the many things we're going to be talking about in today's show. Rookies report early, more of a fitness test. Who's going to be in shape? Nick and Mike might hear something from Saints analysts and from some of the underground sources to see what the guys look like before we head out there next week. And that is when our coverage will really ramp up with this team.
Can't wait. Yeah, and I do think that maybe Mike Evans is a little bit quarterback dependent, so we'll see how that goes this year.
That's what I'm saying.
One thing that is not dependent on anyone else is the quality of PJ's coffee. We are presented by them. They are always bringing it every single time. It doesn't matter who's the brewer because the beans do the heavy lifting there. And we are coming to you from the Better Call BADEAUX podcast studio. So if you get into an accident, make sure you call them. And if you're going to be driving a car, you might as well go check out my guy, Matt Bowers. He is the best car dealer in the whole entire state, the whole Gulf Coast region. You can trust him. He is someone that I personally vouch for. So if you need a car, make sure you go check out one of his and drive that car to a PJ's, of course. They got the best coffee, as we said, locations all over the city. So get there and start your day with them and maybe play our podcast alongside while you're sipping your coffee. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call BADEAUX at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review. And check out Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey. That is an 86 proof blend of aged wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Ponchatoula strawberries blended in New Orleans. It is not for the thin skin. Look for it in your favorite stores, bars, and restaurants. And get to an Ideal Market, home of the freshest produce in the city. They do a great job. In the community, they received a Peter J. Larkin Award from the National Grocers Association for outstanding community support. They always bring the best quality food products at the best prices. They are the home of the largest variety of Hispanic and international foods you will find in the state. A hot deli that surpasses many restaurants in the flavor of their authentic Hispanic dishes, and also the best place to cash checks, wire money, pay bills. They have a complete customer service department like no other. And check out Firehouse Subs, Veteran Boulevard location. Great people doing great things for the community. All right, let's get into the show.
It's not quite training camp, but the rookies, they are going to be reporting this Tuesday. Not necessarily going to be rigorous practice. They're not even having the film crew out there to be filming practices because it sounds like this is a true test of, are guys in shape? What do they look like ahead of training camp? More of meeting rooms. Do they understand the playbook? So for those that don't know, why is this week for the rookies important ahead of training camp?
So this is like orientation. Like, this is where your meeting room is. This is what you need to do. This is how we practice. This is going to be the schedule. It just kind of gives them a little bit more time to get settled in. Here's where you're going to be living in this hotel for the next several weeks. Maybe get to know the area. So then when it is time to rent an apartment, maybe you know where to go. So they just need a little bit more time to become acclimated with the stuff that's going on. So they come in first, and then next week, the veterans come in. They don't need the runway. They know what they're doing. They can show up and just kind of hit the ground and be running. But they want these guys to feel a little bit more comfortable before everything gets going full speed.
Yeah, and acclimated to the heat.
Well, that's not
guys look, we talk about that every year, but I'm not kidding. My official research is this the hottest, like at least June, July we've ever had? Like, I don't say that lightly. Like, I think it really is. Aren't we setting records every day? Feels like 115. That has not been a part of my 20 plus years of living here.
Yeah. Great. So it's tuning up to be real good. We'll see what it's like in a couple weeks.
You're preparing the people because when they listen in on the interviews, so what have you done about the heat? I mean, those are going to be the
it's a hot one today. Yeah, it is, Wally.
All right. Since we're talking about the rookies, this can be our ideal segment presented by Ideal Market. Which guys will be the most crucial to the Saints having success? So not just having an ideal breakout season, but being a consistent go-to.
Oh, well, I'm going to choose the chalk here, and it's the top 2 draft picks, but it's not just because they're the top 2 draft picks. It's because of the position they play. We talked all offseason about how they needed to add some juice to this defensive line. They needed to add depth, and they needed to add juice after they let all those guys get away in free agency. And the first 2 guys they draft are Brian Brzee at defensive tackle and Isaiah Foskey at defensive end. Brzee is probably the answer to this question, though. Foskey will be part of a rotation. It'd be great if Brzee could quickly establish himself as the most talented guy they have at the entire defensive tackle position. That's asking a lot of a rookie. It's asking a lot of a defensive tackle, but it would be ideal, which is the question.
I think the most critical one for me, I'm going Foskey because I feel like they did more at defensive tackle this offseason. If they didn't get anything from him, I think maybe you're okay with Kalen Saunders and Nathan Shepard.
Sure.
At least you're not getting worse. Defensive end might be worse. And I know Peyton Turner has the 0.5 sacks and, all that stuff from last year, but he was at least somebody that got some production for him. You're taking that out. You don't necessarily have anybody filling that in yet. Peyton Turner isn't an answer to that question yet. Foskey needs to be an answer to the question, maybe. So I feel like it has to be him. And I think maybe even Kendre Miller, if you're ranking the top 3 picks, just because the Alvin potential absence is also something that I would factor into that a little bit. But I do agree with you. I think the most bang for your buck, obviously, the first round pick, that's the guy that you want playing at that level and all that stuff. But if he took a little bit longer, his runway is a little bit longer, I think you're potentially a little bit more okay at that position.
I'm not going to put that pressure on him because we've researched in the past. The Saints have drafted a few defensive tackles in year one. None of them bloomed until a couple years in the league. But that's also true of like all pro household name defensive ends. Everyone that's not Aaron Donald started a little slower before they became perennial Pro Bowlers. So it's not a demand, but it would be ideal.
Yes, absolutely ideal.
Is it concerning then that Isaiah Foskey has still not signed with the Saints?
No.
Okay.
It'll be concerning if he's like the last holdout, but I think the last time I checked, there was still 13 second rounders. And it's almost half the second rounders haven't signed. Alontae Taylor was in a similar boat last year. I think he signed the week he reported. So that actually could be a headline any day now. It wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, there's still 20 plus players in the first 2 rounds that haven't signed yet. So he's part of a pack, and it almost always gets done.
Yeah, it's coming up on the deadline, and that's typically when somebody folds last year. Taylor's agent kind of acquiesced to the Saints a little bit. So we'll see how it plays out. It is something, though, that if it doesn't get done, then this is kind of the point where it's like if you're on the eve of training camp and he's on sign, maybe that's when it starts to become a little bit of a like, is he going to miss a practice here? Yeah. Like what actually happens? Because this doesn't happen now. Like everything is so slotted with the draft picks that rookie signings aren't stories anymore. They used to be. It used to be a big negotiation, but now it's supposed to just kind of be like paint by numbers. Mm-hmm. Second round picks try to get first round leverage. Teams want them to sign the same deals that third rounders do. They're trying to take something away. But yeah, I mean, I think this is the point where it's likely to get done. Someone's going to blink. The player's going to want some protection going into camp, exposing his body to the rigors of a camp if he gets hurt without a contract. So, I mean, one way or another, this has to kind of get settled this week.
Worth noting, though, that he did all of rookie minicamp, OTAs, veteran minicamp under, a waiver and everything. So it's not like he has been missing the entire summer.
He's not holding out. Well, let's flip it and look at it from a different perspective. Out of those 3, which one can they afford to not get a lot of production out of?
Well, since we just listed all 3 of them as candidates to be the guy they most need it from, I mean, my gut says Kendre Miller. It doesn't mean I think they won't get production from him, but they have Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams at that position. So if they want to be patient, Kendre Miller needs to show that he's probably ready to be the guy next year if they're going to make any decisions on Alvin's future. But I wouldn't ideally pick any one of those 3. But since I said they need the defensive lineman to produce by default, I have to say Kendre Miller is the guy that can maybe have a slight redshirt year.
Short term, we're talking one season here, like short term thinking. Like long term, obviously it's a disaster. Short term, I think I already said it. I think they can get by with Brzee kind of doing nothing. If we were looking at this a different way and Alvin's available for the whole season, I think the answer is Kendre Miller, because even, you got him, Jamal, even Taysom is in that mix to some degree. But given that circumstance, they got to get something out of him. I feel like you're a little more covered. But I think obviously you just go down the list. Like if Brzee is performing, I think they're the best version of their defense overall. But I think you could get away with him being a little bit of a late bloomer and maybe still be okay on the defensive line.
I think to go with off of yours, Kendre Miller makes sense because of the position group, and with Alvin Kamara, he is going to play, it seems like, the majority of games, even though the suspension is going to come down, but it doesn't seem like it will be a massive suspension because the charges did get bumped down. Of course, obviously we'll find that out, and with Jamal Williams added in too. The
third version of this question is, who do we think is going to make the least impact? And I would bet that Foskey will make the least impact because I think he'll be rotating him with so many guys. hopefully he's more dynamic than Carl Granderson even, who's probably going to be the starter in Tano Passignon and what we've seen from Peyton Turner the last couple of years. But it would not surprise me at all if he's playing like the 5th amount of snaps as a rookie at defensive end. And I don't expect that from the other guys.
Yeah, well, speaking of position groups, which position coach needs to get the most out of his group, presented by Jefferson Financial Credit Union?
Very easy question, and it's the one we've been talking about. It's the defensive line coach. I would pick Todd Grantham's the new defensive line coach, and he's replacing a guy who, had an epic run here in Ryan Nielsen. I would pick him no matter who the defensive linemen were, because that unit needs to improve greatly from last year. But he's also working with basically all new people. You mentioned him, Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard, 2 of their bigger free agent signings. Their top 2 draft picks, Brian Brzee, Isaiah Foskey. I mean, I could list some other candidates here, but he's clearly the guy who's got the most work on his plate.
We're working on like the same pie here, but we're cooking it a little bit differently. And I'm going with the Marcus Robertson, because I think if he gets the most out of the defensive backs, it makes the defensive line better. I feel like maybe there's a cap on your ingredients. Like your crust there is only going to be so good. So the filling that can be elite, needs to reach its elite potential. So I think that's the secondary. I think they have the most talent on the team. Alontae Taylor needs to be the best version of himself. Paulson Adebo needs to be the best version of himself. And if those guys are covering well, now you're getting more sacks. The ball's coming out a little bit slower. I think, like I said, Carl Granderson he is what he is. But these other guys, I think, can be a little bit better. So it's looking at it the same way. Like we both see the sack production.
Yeah.
I just think that your defensive backs need to be better to help those guys, because there's only so much I think they're going to be able to do.
I certainly don't mind your answer from a strategic. I think the secondary needs to lead this team. I think the secondary needs to be the best unit on this entire team. I don't automatically think, Marshawn Lattimore, Tyrann Mathieu, even Marcus May need coaching. I mean, in the teaching sense of it, but without question, that unit has to drive the train.
Look, and if we're talking about coaches that need to step up and produce more, Pete Carmichael is 100% in that conversation. So for Pete Carmichael as an offensive coordinator, everybody's been questioning his tactics. Is it going to work with Derek Carr? This, that, and the other. But will Pete Carmichael meet the moment? Presented by New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company.
Well, I don't know. Maybe he will. He needs to. If he doesn't meet the moment, they're in significant trouble. And I think there's a handful of things that they need to do to get there. They got to have a clear identity this year. I don't want to hear in October, November, December, well, we should have had a better plan for this. We should have had a better plan for that. I like that Pete Carmichael ate his medicine last year. Every time something was wrong, he didn't try to make an excuse. He was just always like, we messed this up. I got to do better. But I don't want to hear that this year. I heard enough of that. There's no more leeway on that. Oh, well, Pete gets it. Well, no, Pete gets it. And now he needs to actually deliver on the things that he's getting. My second thing, and this is where I think they need the most help overall, is they need to figure out how to be a modern offense. And at one point, this was a modern offense. In 2017, and this is so fascinating to me, in 2017, they used motion on 404 plays, 12th in the league. In the 5 years since then, the whole league has changed how they play offense. Last year, the Saints used 351 plays of motion on offense. There's one more game. It's obviously a drop per game, but it's not wildly out of range with what they've always done. That ranked dead last in the NFL by 50 plays. The 49ers led the NFL with 854. They were almost triple what the Saints were doing. It's archaic almost in what they were doing. And then I think it's fascinating that they brought John Gruden in here, because they were super low with him early on in his tenure. And then by 2020, they became 12th in the league in motion. So similar offense, looking at the league, looking at what everybody's doing, Gruden figured out how to kind of tailor to what the rest of the league was doing and keep pace. Whereas the Saints just kind of deteriorated and stayed the same. That has to change. And they're aware of this because they were trying to steal plays from the 49ers last year. There were a couple concepts they took. They tried to introduce it. So they know they need to be better at this, but they just weren't. So that's the main thing for me. And then last one, they got to figure out how to protect better. Their protection needs to be better. That's going to, I think, take care of itself with Derek Carr and just kind of a little bit more organization there. But there's a handful of things that they need to do significantly better to be a modern, effective offense. All
right, we've got Nick's 3 ways the offense needs to improve for next season. We will get Mike Triplett's 3 ways the offense needs to improve right after this.
Now, at New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company, get our $10.99 shrimp remoulade combos with zesty shrimp remoulade and fried shrimp or catfish for only $10.99. And did you hear? Soft-shelled crabs are back at New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company.
Life is full of unexpected events, which can come with unplanned expenses. Jefferson Financial Federal Credit Union has a variety of personal loan products to meet your needs. Whether it's treating yourself to something new, paying off an unexpected expense, or consolidating debt, we are here to help. With rates as low as 8.5% APR, a personal loan with Jefferson Financial can help. Don't let life's curveball impact your financial happiness. Apply today at jeffersonfinancial.org. Membership restrictions apply. Federally insured by NCUA.
Martin Wine and Spirits is home to a selection of hand-picked barrel select bourbon, whiskeys, and much, much more. They are family owned and operated since 1946 and specialize in wine, spirits, gourmet food, gift baskets, catering, and tasting events. They have many locations, so they're never too far away. You can check them out in Metairie, New Orleans, Mandeville, and Baton Rouge, or if it's more convenient, you can always shop online. Whether you're a wine novice or a seasoned collector, you'll enjoy the Martin Wine and Spirit experience.
All right, well, my top 3 ways that Pete Carmichael Jr. can improve this offense. Luckily, Nick already gave 3, and I probably could name about 18 more. I mean, every possible way that an offense can be improved, the Saints can improve the offense. You were talking about your stat on how little they used motion. I also stole another Nick Underhill stat last year about how they were by far the lowest in the NFL in play action pass attempts last year, which is a stunning number because this team wanted to be like a ground and pound run first offense last year. And they were bad at play action passes. They were bad at being a run first offense. They had a bottom 5 conversion rate last year on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. I mean, they were losing games because they could not protect the lead. They could not convert a 3rd and 1. A lot of that had to do with offensive line injuries. But then on the flip side, they were also bottom 5 in explosive plays. They basically did nothing well last year. So, you got to see them do the old school tough, tough brand of football better and be able to convert 3rd and 1. You've got to see them, do explosive plays better. But look, the top 2 on my list are the same guys we've talked about for years now, Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. You've got 2 uniquely talented players. Show that you know what to do with them. Alvin Kamara has grown so stale in recent years, and part of that, as Nick has pointed out, he's been better between the tackles than outside. Everybody says, why don't you get him outside on the edges? Well, he's an older player who's not dominating outside the edges. But I put some of that on the coaches too. Figure it out, because I have not seen more guys more talented in the open field. Figure out how to give him some space. If you have to line him up at receiver more, you've got the running back depth to do it now. And we've talked about Taysom Hill a million times. The one thing, though, will Pete Carmichael meet the moment? They gave him the number 1 tool that any offensive coordinator needs, almost like handpicked quarterback. Like, we know the offense you run, Pete, and here's a quarterback who looks like he was built to run this type of offense. I mean, he's going to give Pete talked about how excited he was to be able to give a quarterback 2 or 3 play calls. He said that makes my job a lot easier. He'll read the defense and then he'll get us in the best play. You talked about how Derek Carr played with Gruden. This is a similar offense in its bones. This should be a guy who can run what Pete Carmichael wants to run. So if it doesn't work with Derek Carr, it's not going to work with Pete Carmichael.
Meet the moment or meet the road, really, is kind of what it is. And look,
fans share that sentiment too.
I mean, I think it was close. I think it was right there on the cusp of it, honestly. And I think the league-wide turnover probably bought some patience in the overall, how are we going to get better at this? And okay, well, maybe it's just best trying to figure it out with this guy, with the right quarterback, see how it goes. But look, a couple of things we're talking about, these issues. Bad on 3rd and 1, 4th one. Jamal Williams, bad at motion. John Gruden comes in to help him out. So it seems like there's at least an awareness of a lot of the areas where they were poor, and they're going to try to find ways to get better. But all the tools are there now. So meet the moment.
All the tools are there if this offensive line stays healthy. To me, that is the number. First of all, they've gone through, so many quarterbacks. Jameis gets hurt, and then Trevor Siemian, and then Taysom Hill, and then Jameis gets hurt again, and Andy Dalton. That all hurts. But I think the underrated thing that is destroyed this offense was when the offensive line injuries went across the board the last 2 years. I mean, there were the second halves of each of the last 2 seasons, or more the middle of last season. It doesn't matter what play they called, what game plan they went. They couldn't run, they couldn't pass, they couldn't move the ball inches when that offensive line got down to all backups.
You mentioned Derek Carr being the missing piece, and that gets right into our question of the day presented by Martin Wine and Spirits. Thank you, Warren D. Adams, for sending this on Twitter. Due to potential poor performance, not injury, is there any way Derek Carr gets benched in favor of Jameis Winston at some point during the season?
Nope.
Yeah. That was a pretty easy one
Yeah,
to
that's
answer.
an
I
easy
think when we all
question.
saw this question come in, but it does leave some wiggle room to talk about this because there are some people that still believe in Jameis Winston and still think he's going to be a starting quarterback, whether that's the Twitter fingers saying that or whether NFL experts really do believe that. Is there really any sort of place where he
not
could
here.
beat him out?
There's a place, but not here. There's not a place here. I mean, they're committed to him. This is the guy. This is who they're moving forward with. They handpicked him. It's DA's guy. He fits Pete Carmichael's system. People need to let that go. But there is a reality where Jameis is a starter for another team. And that's still something that I'm looking out for. I think if there's an injury in a training camp where somebody doesn't like their backup and they want to try to upgrade, I think Jameis is effectively quarterback number 33 in the NFL right now. So, Oakland or Las Vegas is the one place that I kind of am looking at right now. Jimmy Garoppolo has the weird injury situation. Maybe he's not ready. They want to try to save their season. Josh McDaniels doesn't have that much runway there. Like, he would be motivated to go out and get another quarterback. And potentially maybe that is someone like Jameis. And that would be the best situation, I think, for Jameis. If he gets a chance to start somewhere, it'd be good for the Saints because they get something for him. But as far as starting games here due to performance and not injury, it's not going to happen. They're going, this is the guy that's going to help keep the ship afloat, or everybody's going down with it. And this is the sink or swim. There's not going to be like a going back and forth. Like, no, either Derek Carr works or Dennis Allen doesn't have a job. Pete Carmichael doesn't have a job, and everybody's out of here together, the same way they came in with the Raiders. So no, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is valid because Jameis Winston is one of the most experienced and backup quarterbacks in the league. So it invites the question, like, how short is the leash? But if this is a Derek Carr related question, he's got all the runway that almost any quarterback top 10 in how secure his job is. I mean, they put everything into making Derek Carr work. This is not an open competition in training camp. It's not. And Jameis Winston's saying all the right things. It's the same things Andy Dalton said last year. Look, he's number one. I'm number two. I'm here to support number one. And so this is not a QB competition despite the credentials of the backup.
It is contingent on performance, though, and I think none of us believe this will happen. But if the Saints go 0-5 to open the season, do you consider it? I mean, we thought that there was no way Andy Dalton would beat out Jameis Winston, and sure enough, it happened. Also, that had a lot to do with injury as well. But if Dennis Allen and also Pete Carmichael backs against the wall, they go 0-6 at that point. Is that when you start considering it, or is it no? You're just going to start every game until it works?
Yeah, if they go 0-6, that's it. Yeah. It's going to be someone else coming in and figure it out because they've seen Derek Carr be good enough. He's not an 0-6 quarterback with this roster. So if they're 0-6, that's indicative of poor coaching more than the quarterback, I think. And yeah, I don't think if they're 0-5, 0-6, I don't think they're around to make that decision of who's starting the next game. There's going to be an interim coach somewhere, Darren Rizzi. I don't even know who it would be.
Look,
but yeah,
there's a world where we're having this conversation 5 games into the season, a terrible world, like not a season that I want to watch or anything like that. But obviously it would require desperate measures for them to undo the major commitment that they've made to Derek Carr. And God willing, the Saints don't reach that level of desperation. That's not an insult to Jameis Winston. Like, they would do anything in the world. But this is an epic failure if the guy they just gave the biggest contract in franchise history to is such a failure that they have to look to bench him at 2 months into a season. That would be the absolute worst case scenario.
And Derek Carr and the Saints will get the Tennessee Titans week 1 right here in the Dome.
That game just got harder.
Yeah. DeAndre Hopkins is somebody the Saints have not been able to avoid the last 2 years, obviously with the Cardinals. And I believe that was when Alontae Taylor was matched up with him. And that's when we got to see him really kind of break out. Now he's with the Titans. So is this now shaping up to be one of the best matchups? DeAndre Hopkins, and we presumably believe it will be Marshawn Lattimore against him. Yeah,
I'm excited to see it. It adds a little juice to that game. That's a good offense. I mean, they still have decent pieces. There's a chance that they could be challenging just in the way they play. They kind of get you working through the run game. They're one of those play action teams that, that's where the league's going. But I think you drop Marshawn on them. You see how it goes. This is the type of matchup he gets up for. But I will say this about Marshawn. I think the one underrated thing the last couple of years, and it's been clouded a little bit by injuries, is that I think we've seen the maturation of that player to where this variance week to week based on matchups hasn't really existed in the same way it did earlier in his career. I feel like we've seen him take games at a very even level. Now, obviously, there's that extra gear where maybe, Mike Evans, you go through and you read the old comments that he's made and you get a little bit angrier about it and you play a little bit better. But overall, there just hasn't been the up and down, up and down, up and down. But look, you drop one of the best in the league in week 1, and now you give him 6 weeks to prepare for it. I think we're going to see the best of Marshawn in that game.
Yeah, I look forward to watching the matchup. It's funny. We pointed out when we've done the schedule breakdown a couple other times how they're not facing a lot of dynamic quarterbacks or passing offenses this year. I think some of their bigger tests will come against running quarterbacks. I don't know that this makes Ryan Tannehill suddenly a dynamic passer, but it's now one of the bigger threats among the passing offenses they're going to face all season. So they'll get tested early.
Is Tannehill's going to start week 1, right? It's not going to be Levis or...
No,
I don't know. There has been
safe,
a lot of buzz on social media, but I don't think that holds.
Yeah, I
just
would
maybe
be
later in the season if Levis takes him over. Yeah, maybe like Pittsburgh last year. Yeah.
Send that question to the Titans podcast. When will Tannehill get benched? It'll be sooner than Derek Carr gets benched.
Yeah, I'm guessing it'll probably be like Pittsburgh, where the rookie maybe takes over after the wheels come off or something like that.
Yeah.
And Tannehill, I mean, I still think of Tannehill as an above average guy, not a guy who's about to completely be done in this league. So. I would be really surprised if that happens before week 1.
Yeah, Lattimore and Hopkins is going to be one of the best matchups that we will see for the Saints this coming season. And speaking of elite coverage, our guys over on NewOrleans.Football, Mike Triplett, Nick Underhill, will be coming out with some pretty awesome content this week. And later today, also check out Mike's, if you want to talk a little bit about what you're putting out on the website
just
today.
top position battles to watch. We've done, Nick did the great piece last week on who's on the bubble, roster locks. We did our 53-man roster projections, but these are maybe a little higher up. Who's battling for starting jobs and key roles on the team, and I broke down the top 7 of those.
Yeah, and if you can't tell, we are just itching to get out to training camp. That will be next week. Of course, the rookies report tomorrow, and we'll see you guys next time.